One of my favourite games for the Nintendo 64 was Mystical Ninja starring Goemon. Released in 1997 by Konami, the game was a semi-open world 3D action-adventure that felt like a combination of Super Mario and Zelda set within feudal Japan. And I absolutely adored it. The atmosphere, the bizarre, often poorly translated humour, the memorable wacky characters, outstanding soundtrack, and of course the gigantic robot boss battles. But what I didn't realise at the time, Mystical Ninja was but a small part of a well-established franchise dating back as far as the Japanese arcades from 1986. Despite the character's long legacy, very few titles actually released outside of Japan, and most of which do require some knowledge of the Japanese language. Although quite a few of these titles have now been given English fan translations. Nowadays, sadly, like so many other of Konami's legendary characters, the company no longer appear to be interested in doing anything with the Goemon franchise anymore. And surely I can't be the only person here that felt especially heartbroken seeing that one particular level in Super Mario Odyssey. Just felt like Mystical Ninja to me.
Mameda no Bakeru! Oracle Saitaro no Sainan!
But fortunately we now have a Goemon successor, Mameda no Bakeru, sorry I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, developed by longtime Nintendo ally Goodfeel, a company which was in actual fact founded by a former Konami developer. The game is currently Japan only, and I did have to import myself this copy here. Still, just look at this beautiful box art, and it's especially soul destroying when you open it up and there's just an empty white void inside. What's the point of collecting physical games anymore? First and foremost, no, this is not an open world action adventure, but instead Bakeru follows a level by level structure similar to that of Mystical Ninja's N64 sequel, Goemon's Great Adventure. The levels are small confined areas very similar to that of Super Mario 3D World or Kirby and the Forgotten Land. There are more than 50 stages to make your way through and a pretty good variety of locales to visit. It is a colourful jaunt for a wacky depiction of Japan, so in that sense it does recapture a little bit of that old Mystical Ninja magic. There are a wealth of collectibles to find, money which can be spent on items, deviously hidden raccoons, some of which are incredibly well hidden, Gashapon capsule toys to add to your growing collection, and this little poop guy here, who offers an interesting fact about Japan, which unfortunately I can't read. You don't have to collect everything, and the rewards for 100% completion is admittedly a tad underwhelming, but finding and breaking free of these lanterns is a mandatory requirement to complete the stage. But there are plenty of them scattered about, and they're extremely easy to find. The gameplay mostly comprises of action platforming, there are boss battles to overcome, racing sequences to partake in, Star Fox inspired shooter levels, and yes, giant robot battles. Although unlike Goemon, they do play more so like a fighting game. It's all very light-hearted fun. Main hero Bakeru controls great, his slick and fast movement almost feel like a simplified moveset of Super Mario. The ZR button grants you a shield which you can use to reflect projectiles, and you attack with a pair of taiko drumsticks, both of which are assigned to one of the shoulder buttons. There's a really nice satisfying weight to your blows, and hold them down for a charge attack. It is a bit of a strange setup for a platformer to have your attacks assigned to the shoulder buttons, but it definitely works. But combat is honestly pretty simplistic and a tad repetitive. Bakeru supposedly loosely translates to transform, and throughout the course of your adventure you will gain new transformation abilities, some of which are surely inspired by the special powers of Goemon and friends. The time you're allowed to spend in your new form is only limited by the magic gauge on the bottom right of the screen here. Most of these transformations are entirely combat focused, and they do feel as though they can completely break the game. Seriously, you are able to clear out hordes of enemies by just mashing the buttons, and it's all too easy to keep your magic meter replenished. I almost had to force myself to stop using these transformations during boss battles. It kind of felt like I was cheating. The visuals aren't really going to blow your mind and sometimes feel rather limited by a budget, but it is a bright, colourful looking game with good art direction. In fact, there are plenty of neat little visual touches that I love, such as the textured look of paths and ocean waves, the logs of a wooden bridge that sway to your footsteps, or the diamond-shaped lens flare of a rising sun. It's not an amazing looking game, but it definitely has a lot of visual charm going for it. For such simplistic looking visuals, I was somewhat taken aback at the game's surprisingly long load times. Worse still is the inconsistent frame rate. I'm not usually sensitive to low frame rate, but the game can feel very rough in wide open spaces, or whenever there are too many enemies on screen, it can get pretty unpleasant to look at. And unfortunately, well, no surprise here, it feels just as inconsistent in handheld mode, if not worse in some areas. Which is a shame, the colours really pop on that OLED screen. As for the music, well, this is a tough one for me. Going back to the Mystical Ninja again, the music was a major part of why I loved that game so much. A team effort of composers with a heavy use of the Japanese free strings, shamisen. There were even fully vocalised songs by professional singers. All of this was on a single cartridge too. It was unique, distinctly Japanese, and just something I had never experienced before at the time. So with all that said, it does feel incredibly unfair to compare such a legacy to Bakeru's soundtrack. I'll admit, I was really disappointed with the music at first. But having long since completed the game, I still find myself humming along to a couple of tracks, with a few of them stuck in my head now. It's good. Perhaps almost up there with some of Goemon's best. I would recommend cranking up the volume slider, toning down the effects ever so slightly, and just appreciate the music as its own thing. As I mentioned before, this is a Japan-only game. There are no in-game options for English text, but I can at least say the game is very import-friendly. The biggest hurdle to overcome is going to be the shop and item descriptions. Despite its technical issues and the monotonous combat, it was a fun game to play every evening, complete a level or two, or just return to areas to look for one of those pesky hidden raccoons. Does it live up to being a successor to the Goemon franchise? I'm not quite sure it does. Admittedly, I don't know an awful lot about Goemon, having only played so few of them. Nor is the Mystical Ninja on the Nintendo 64 some perfect video game. It's pretty old and outdated now. But just look at those beautiful 2D trees. The art direction, character designs, and some of the music are certainly on point, but I'd say the gameplay has far more in common with the likes of Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Bakeru is a fun game, but it feels like another easygoing, incredibly charming Nintendo platformer. And that's certainly not a bad thing. If you're feeling at least just a little bit curious about Bakeru, I'd say go for it. It's been a fine addition to add to my Switch library.